The anomaly. Commander Telex let out a long, three-tone sigh as he stared at the monitoring screens. Another cycle. Another empty report. Sector 87 Delta was always empty. It had been empty since the Vexari Concordat had established this listening post 30 rotations ago. It would likely remain empty until the heat death of the universe. Terminal status report. Operator Nix. He droned, not bothering to look at his junior officer. Nix's slender fingers danced across the console. Her skin, a pale lavender that darkened around her neck frills, glowed softly in the dim light of the monitoring station. All systems nominal, Commander. Background radiation consistent with spatial norms. No anomalous readings. Telex nodded. Of course, there were no anomalous readings. There never were. Outpost Drelk 9 was punishment duty, not an assignment. The endless void of 87 Delta was a buffer zone, a spatial desert between the Vexari territories and the remnants of what had once been human space. But humans had been gone for over a century now, vanished after the collapse war. Their systems were abandoned, their colonies empty. I don't understand why we even maintain this position, Nix muttered, rolling her head to stretch her neck frills. The humans are gone. Their remnant factions were absorbed or eliminated. We're watching an empty grave. Orders are orders, Telex replied, the standard answer. The High Command believes. The monitoring station chimed. Once, twice, then a continuous tone. Both Vexari froze, staring at the console. A red light blinked where there should have been nothing. What is that? Telex demanded, suddenly alert. Nix's fingers moved rapidly. Unknown, Commander. There's something in the sector. Something that wasn't there 10 minutes ago during our last sweep. Impossible. Run diagnostics. Already running. Diagnostics show all systems functioning properly. Nix looked up, her eyes wide. Commander, this is not a malfunction. Telex moved to her station, watching as she magnified the signal. Could be debris, or a rogue asteroid. No, sir. It's too uniform, too structured. And it's large. Nix's voice dropped. Very large. The screen shifted as targeting arrays locked onto the anomaly. The fuzzy outline sharpened, revealing a massive silhouette floating in the void. It was unmistakably a ship, but unlike any Vexari vessel. Its hull was sleek and dark, absorbing the distant starlight rather than reflecting it. No running lights, no visible propulsion systems. Identify, Telex ordered, feeling a chill along his spine. Nix ran the image through their database. No match in Vexari records. Checking against allied species and known civilizations. Telex leaned closer. There was something about the shape, something disturbingly familiar. Sir, Nix's voice quavered. I found a partial match. In the historical archives, a second image appeared beside the anomaly. An old schematic, labeled in an outdated Vexari script. The resemblance was unmistakable. That's impossible, Telex whispered. The database identifies it as human in origin, specifically a Terran Alliance deep space vessel. But sir, those ships haven't been seen in a century. Telex stared at the image, his professional detachment crumbling. Check again. It can't be human. The humans are gone. Nix ran the scan again. Confirmed, sir. 87% probability of human origin. And sir, she hesitated. It's not wreckage. Power signatures are present, though minimal. That ship is operational. The implications hit Telex like a physical blow. A human ship, here in Vexari space, a century after humanity's supposed extinction. He hit the communication array. This is Commander Telex of Outpost Drelk 9. Priority 1 alert to Vexari Command. We have identified an unknown vessel of probable human origin in Sector 87 Delta, requesting immediate instructions and reinforcement. The response came almost instantly. Maintain surveillance. Do not approach. Battle Group Vorn en route. Estimated arrival. 2 standard hours. Telex acknowledged and turned back to the monitors. Keep scanning. I want to know everything about that ship before the battle group arrives. For the next hour, they watched as their instruments probed the mysterious vessel. It remained motionless, giving no indication it had detected them. "Sir," Nix called out, "I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations within the hull. They don't match any known propulsion or weapon systems." Telex frowned. Could it be preparing to jump? I don't think so. It's more like, well, I don't know what it's like. It doesn't match anything in our records. The communication array chimed. "Commander Telex, this is Admiral Vorn of Battle Group 7. We're approaching your position. Report." Telex straightened. "Admiral, we've been monitoring the vessel. No change in position. We detect energy signatures but cannot identify their purpose. The ship appears to be of human design, though significantly advanced from historical records." "Human." The Admiral's voice was sharp. "Impossible. The humans were eradicated. The database match is conclusive, Admiral." There was a pause. "We'll take it from here, Commander. Maintain your position." The massive Vexari warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the sector, their hulls gleaming in the starlight, a stark contrast to the dark human vessel. 5 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and Admiral Vorn's flagship, the dreadnought Inevitable Dominance. "Battle group has arrived," Nix reported unnecessarily. "They're deploying in standard confrontation formation." Telex nodded. "Now we'll get some answers." On the main view screen, the Vexari vessels surrounded the human ship at a cautious distance. The flagship broadcast on all frequencies, in all known languages including Archaic human dialects. "Unidentified vessel. This is Admiral Vorn of the Vexari Concordat. You have entered sovereign Vexari space. Identify yourself immediately or be fired upon." No response. "Admiral." Telex calmed privately. "Our readings suggest the vessel may be dormant or operating on minimal power. They may not be receiving communications." "We're detecting active systems, Commander," Vorn replied. "They hear us. They're choosing not to respond." The Admiral issued new orders to his battle group. A destroyer moved closer, scanning the human vessel with more powerful arrays. "Commander," Nix whispered, "I'm detecting an energy spike from the human ship." Before Telex could respond, a pulse of blue-white light erupted from the human vessel. It wasn't a weapon, at least not a conventional one. The light engulfed the destroyer, and for a moment, the ship seemed frozen in space. Then, all of its systems went dark. The destroyer drifted, powerless. "What happened?" Telex demanded. Nix's fingers flew across her console. "Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, but far more sophisticated than anything in our arsenal. It completely neutralized their ship without causing physical damage." The remaining Vexari vessels immediately shifted to battle positions. The flagship broadcast again. "This is your final warning. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire." This time, there was a response, not in words, but in action. The human vessel moved. Not slowly, not gradually, but with a sudden acceleration that defied the known laws of physics. One moment it was surrounded by Vexari warships. The next, it was behind the formation, as if it had teleported. "Impossible," Telex breathed. "Nothing can move that fast without a jump drive," and there was no jump signature. The Vexari battle group scattered, trying to re-establish their formation. The human ship moved again, this time positioning itself directly above the flagship. It was a clear threat, and Admiral Vorn responded accordingly. All vessels opened fire. Energy beams and missile salvos converged on the human ship. Telex expected to see it vaporized in the verage. Instead, the weapons seemed to dissipate harmlessly against an invisible barrier surrounding the vessel. Not shields as the Vexari understood them. There was no energy flare, no visible deflection. The attacks simply ceased to exist before they could impact the hull. "Their defensive technology," Nix whispered. "It's beyond anything we've ever encountered." The human ship pulsed again, this time emitting a wideband signal that washed over the entire battle group. Every Vexeri vessel suddenly lost power, drifting helplessly in space. Only outpost Drelk 9, at the edge of the sector, was spared. They disabled an entire battle group, Telek said in disbelief, without firing a single conventional weapon. The communication array crackled to life, but it wasn't Admiral Vorn. The voice that came through was strange, oddly accented Vexari, as if spoken by someone who had learned it from recordings rather than actual speakers. Vexeri Monitoring Station. This is Captain Eleanor Chen of the Earth Reclamation Ship Memory of Terra. Your military vessels have been temporarily neutralized. They will regain power in approximately 1 standard hour. No permanent damage has been inflicted. Telix and Nix exchanged shocked glances. An actual human was speaking to them, a species supposedly extinct for a century. This is Commander Telix of Outpost Drelk 9, he responded carefully. You have entered sovereign Vexeri space and disabled our vessels. Explain your presence and intentions immediately. There was a pause before the human responded. Your ancestors drove humanity to the brink of extinction during the Collapse War. You believed you had succeeded. You were mistaken. A chill ran down Telix's spine. His education had covered the Collapse War, but always from the perspective that the human threat had been eliminated, that their dangerous expansion had been halted for the good of all civilized species. The war ended a century ago, he replied. If humans survived, why reveal yourselves now? Why here? Because, Commander Telix, the human voice replied, we are not here by chance. We have come to reclaim what was taken from us. And your outpost is merely the beginning. The main view screen changed, showing not the disabled Vexeri fleet, but a vast starfield. Points of light began to appear within it, dozens, then hundreds of them, each resolving into a silhouette matching the ship before them. By the ancestors, Nix whispered, an entire fleet. When your battle group regains power, Captain Chen continued, inform your leaders that humanity has returned. And this time, we are prepared. The transmission cut off, leaving Telix staring at the screen in horror. The single human vessel began to move away, heading toward the emerging fleet. Commander, Nix said quietly, what do we do? Telix looked at the disabled Vexari battle group, then at the gathering human armada. A species thought extinct for a century had returned with technology far beyond Vexari understanding, and they wanted revenge. We warn everyone, he said grimly, while we still can. As if in response to his words, the outpost's systems flickered. The lights dimmed, then returned to normal, but the communication array remained dead. They've isolated us, Nix reported. Long-range communications are offline. Telix stared at the view screen as more human ships appeared from the darkness of space. The Vexeri Concordat had believed itself the dominant power in this region of the galaxy. That certainty had just been shattered. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. They had been hiding, evolving, preparing, and now they had returned. The war that everyone thought had ended a century ago was about to begin anew. The revelation. Admiral Vorn's flagship drifted lifelessly in the void, surrounded by equally powerless Vexari warships. Inside Outpost Drelk 9, Commander Telix worked frantically to restore communications, but every attempt failed. The human technology had thoroughly isolated them. Sir, Nix called from her station, I've managed to get short-range sensors back online. The human fleet is holding position at the edge of the sector. They haven't advanced. Telix frowned. Why disable our forces but not attack? What are they waiting for? Perhaps, Nix hesitated. Perhaps they want to talk. After a century of hiding, that seems unlikely. Telix moved to the main console. Keep trying to establish contact with Admiral Vorn's vessel. They should be regaining power soon if the human captain was telling the truth. As if on cue, the lights on the nearest Vexeri destroyer flickered to life. One by one, the battle group's systems reactivated exactly as Captain Chen had predicted. The communication array chimed. Commander Telex, Admiral Vorn's voice was tight with controlled fury. Report status. We are functional but isolated, Admiral. Long-range communications remain offline. The human vessel has joined a larger fleet at the sector boundary. A fleet. The Admiral's voice sharpened. How many ships? Hundreds, sir, with more arriving. They appear to be waiting. There was a long pause. The High Command must be informed immediately. This changes everything. Before Telex could respond, the communication array emitted a different tone. Incoming transmission from the human vessel. Sir, put it through, Vorn ordered. I want to hear what these ghosts have to say. Captain Chen's voice filled the command center again, but this time, her transmission included visual data. The image of a human appeared on screen, tall for their species, with dark hair pulled back severely from a face marked with small scars. Her uniform was deep blue with silver insignia that Telex didn't recognize. Admiral Vorn, she said, I apologize for the temporary neutralization of your fleet. It was necessary to prevent an escalation that would have resulted in casualties on both sides. You invade our space, disable our ships, and then speak of preventing escalation. Vorn's voice was cold. The Vexari Concordat eliminated the human threat a century ago. Whatever remnant you represent will soon join your ancestors in oblivion. Chen's expression didn't change. That kind of thinking led to the Collapse War. Admiral, it cost billions of lives, human, Vexari, and dozens of other species. We're not here to repeat history. Then why are you here? Telex interjected. Chen turned her attention to him. Commander Telex, the observant one who first spotted us. We're here because this sector, Sector 87 Delta in your terminology, doesn't belong to the Vexari Concordat. It never did. Nonsense, Vorn snapped. This sector has been under Vexari control for over a century. Only because you believed its original inhabitants were extinct, Chen replied. This was the Terran Neutral Zone, established by treaty at the end of the First Contact War, 2 centuries ago. When you launched the surprise attack that began the Collapse War, this was the first neutral territory you violated. Telex glanced at Nix, whose expression showed the same confusion he felt. Their historical education mentioned nothing of a neutral zone or a treaty. The Collapse War had been presented as a necessary preemptive strike against an aggressive human expansion. Your version of history is conveniently self-serving, Vorn said dismissively. But it changes nothing. You are outnumbered and outmatched. The full might of the Concordat will descend upon your fleet, and this time, humanity's extinction will be absolute. Chen sighed, looking genuinely regretful. We suspected this would be your response. Before you commit to another war, Admiral, there's something you should see. The transmission changed, showing what appeared to be historical footage. The image quality was grainy, the recording obviously old. It showed a Vexari delegation meeting with humans around a large table. Documents were signed. Hands were shaken in the human custom. This is the signing of the Harmony Accords, Chen narrated. The treaty that ended the First Contact War and established the neutral zone. Your government has erased this from your historical records, but we preserved everything. Just as we preserved the truth about what followed. The footage changed, showing Vexari warships opening fire on unarmed human colonies, cities burning, civilians fleeing, the systematic destruction of human outposts across multiple star systems. Operation Silent Purge. Chen continued. The surprise attack your ancestors launched while publicly maintaining the peace. 11 billion humans died in the first wave alone. Not soldiers, civilians, families, children. Telex felt sick. This couldn't be true. The Vexari were a proud warrior species, but they had honor. They wouldn't massacre civilians, would they? The footage continued, showing human forces in retreat across the galaxy, losing ground steadily as Vexari fleets advanced. We were unprepared, Chen said softly. We'd downsized our military after the Harmony Accords. We trusted you. Propaganda. Vorn spat. Fabricated to justify your aggression. If only it were, Chen replied. But deep down, Admiral, you know it's true. Why else would your government erase all records of the treaty? Why rewrite history unless the truth was too damning to preserve? Telix looked to Admiral Vorn, expecting another denial. Instead, he saw something troubling. Hesitation, the briefest flicker of doubt in the Admiral's eyes. These ancient grievances are irrelevant, Vorn finally said. The present reality is what matters. And the reality is that the Vexari Concordat will not surrender its territory to a species that should no longer exist. Chen nodded, as if this was exactly the response she had expected. We thought you might feel that way. That's why we didn't come alone. The view screen shifted to show the human fleet again. But now there was something else. Behind the human vessels, massive objects were appearing. Not ships, but structures, orbital platforms, each the size of a small moon. For a century, we've been hiding, yes, Chen said, but not cowering. Building, planning, making allies among the species who also suffered under Vexari expansion. The image widened further, revealing not just hundreds of human ships, but thousands of vessels of various designs, some recognizable as belonging to species the Vexari had subjugated or driven to the fringes of known space. This is the Reclamation Fleet, Chen explained. Representatives from 27 species who have united under a single purpose, to restore balance to this region of the galaxy. Admiral Vorn's composure finally cracked. Impossible. We would have detected a force of this size. Just as you detected us until we chose to reveal ourselves. Chen smiled thinly. Admiral, human technology didn't stagnate during our exile. We developed methods of moving undetected, of communicating without using traditional subspace channels. How do you think we coordinated a fleet of this size without your awareness? Telix stared at the screen in awe and terror. If the human was telling the truth, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. The Vexari Concordat, long the dominant force in the sector, was suddenly outmatched. What do you want? Telix asked quietly. Chen turned to him again. A good question, Commander. We don't want war. We've seen enough death to last several lifetimes. What we want is restoration. The neutral zone reestablished. The subjugated worlds freed. A new balance of power, enshrined in a treaty that cannot be secretly violated. The Concordat will never agree to such terms, Vorn declared, but his voice lacked conviction. They will when they understand the alternative, Chen replied calmly. We could have attacked without warning, just as your ancestors did to us. We could have wiped out your colonies before you knew we existed. We didn't. That should tell you something about our intentions. She paused, letting her words sink in. We're transmitting comprehensive treaty terms to your vessels now. Review them. Discuss them with your leadership. You have 48 standard hours to provide an initial response. And if we refuse, Vorn challenged, then we will demonstrate why that would be unwise. Chen's expression softened slightly. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Enough blood has been shed over old hatreds. The transmission ended, leaving the Vexari in stunned silence. Telix watched Admiral Vorn's image on the view screen, wondering what the Admiral was thinking. After a long moment, Vorn spoke. Commander Telix, you are to accompany me back to the flagship. Your first-hand observations of the initial contact will be valuable to our analysis. Yes, Admiral, Telix acknowledged, surprised by the request. As preparations were made for his departure, Nyx approached him privately. Sir, she whispered, do you believe what the human said about our history? Telix hesitated. I don't know, but I plan to find out. Hours later, Telix stood in the Admiral's war room aboard the Inevitable Dominance. Senior officers argued fiercely around a holographic display of the human fleet. We should attack immediately, insisted the battle group's tactical officer. before more of their ships arrive. "Did you see the same fleet I did?" countered another officer. "They outnumber us 10-1, with technology we barely understand." "The Concordat does not negotiate with threats," a third officer declared, "especially not from a species that should be extinct." Admiral Vorn stood silently at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Finally, he raised a hand for silence. "Commander Telix," he said, "you observed the human ship before any of us. What is your assessment?" All eyes turned to Telix. He cleared his throat. "The human vessel demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond our current understanding. Their defensive systems neutralized our entire battle group without causing permanent damage. If they had wanted to destroy us, I believe they could have done so easily." Murmurs of discontent spread through the room. "Furthermore," Telix continued, steeling himself, "I've reviewed the treaty terms they transmitted. They are not unreasonable. They ask for the restoration of territories that, according to their evidence, were never legally ceded to us. They propose joint governance of disputed regions and reparations that, while substantial, would not cripple the Concordat economy." "You sound like you're advocating surrender," the tactical officer sneered. "I'm advocating survival," Telix replied firmly. "If their claims about our history are fabrications, we should be able to disprove them easily. But if they're telling the truth," he trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. Admiral Vorn stared at him for a long moment, then tapped a command into the table console. A secure data crystal emerged from a slot. "Commander Telix," he said, "you will take this to your station and review its contents privately. It is classified at the highest level. Report your findings directly to me, no one else." Confused but intrigued, Telix accepted the crystal. "Yes, Admiral." Back at Outpost Drelk 9, Telix locked himself in his private quarters and inserted the crystal into his personal console. What he saw made his blood run cold. The crystal contained classified historical archives, the real history of the Vexari Concordat's expansion. The Harmony Accords were real. The surprise attack was real. The systematic attempt to exterminate humanity was real. All of it, hidden from the Vexari people for generations, preserved only in the most restricted military archives. Captain Chen had been telling the truth. When he returned to the flagship, Telix found Admiral Vorn alone in his private study. "You've seen it," Vorn said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Admiral. Why show me this?" Vorn sighed heavily. "Because someone needs to know. Someone who wasn't raised in the upper echelons of the military, indoctrinated from birth to believe in Vexari supremacy at any cost. Someone who might see another path forward." "You're considering accepting their terms," Telix realized. "The High Command will never agree," Vorn said quietly. "They would rather see the Concordat burn than admit our bloody foundations. But I sent troops into battle for a century, Commander. I've watched countless young Vexari die for what I believed was a just cause. I won't send millions more to die for a lie." Telix absorbed this in silence. "What will you do?" "What I must." Vorn straightened. "I'm going to accept the humans' invitation to discuss their terms aboard their command vessel. Alone." "Sir, that's extremely dangerous." "Perhaps, but less dangerous than the alternative." Vorn fixed Telix with an intense stare. "If I don't return, Commander, you have my authorization to release the contents of that crystal to every Vexari colony world. Our people deserve to know the truth before they're asked to die for a fabrication." The next day, Admiral Vorn's shuttle departed for the human command ship. The battle group watched in tense silence as the small vessel was escorted into the heart of the massive alien fleet. Hours passed. The deadline for response approached. Then, finally, the Admiral's shuttle emerged from the human fleet. But it wasn't alone. It was accompanied by a human diplomatic vessel. When Admiral Vorn returned to his flagship, he brought Captain Chen and a small delegation with him. They gathered in the war room, where Vorn addressed his stunned officers. "I have reviewed the historical evidence, and discuss terms with the human leadership, he announced. I am convinced that the path forward lies not in continued conflict, but in reconciliation and truth. Protests erupted immediately, but Vorn silenced them with a raised hand. I have signed a preliminary agreement on behalf of the Vexeri forces in this sector, he continued. We will withdraw from the disputed territories and establish a demilitarized zone as a first step toward a comprehensive peace. This is treason, the tactical officer shouted. No, Vorn replied firmly. Treason would be sending you all to die for a lie. He nodded to an aide, who distributed data pads to each officer. Review the truth for yourselves. Then decide if you're willing to sacrifice your lives, and the lives of those under your command, to defend a history that never existed. The room fell silent as the officers reviewed the classified archives. Telix watched their expressions change from anger to disbelief to horror as the truth of their past was revealed. Captain Chen stepped forward. We don't expect generations of hatred to disappear overnight, she said, but we can begin by acknowledging the truth and working toward a future where our children don't inherit our conflicts. In the days that followed, the news spread throughout the sector. The human fleet, the reclamation fleet, began the process of re-establishing the old boundaries. Some Vexeri colonies resisted, but most, upon learning the truth of their history, accepted the change with reluctant understanding. At Outpost Drelk 9, now positioned on the border of the new neutral zone, Commander Telix and Operator Nix watched as human ships and Vexeri vessels cautiously navigated the same space for the first time in a century. Do you think it will last? Nix asked quietly. This peace. Telix considered the question. I don't know. Old hatreds run deep, but so does the desire to survive, to build something better for those who come after us. He looked at the screen where a human supply ship and a Vexeri transport were docking at the newly established joint station that had replaced the military outpost. One thing is certain, he said. The galaxy will never be the same, and perhaps that's for the best. Nix nodded slowly. All because we checked the sector twice and found something that wasn't supposed to be there. A human ship that shouldn't have existed, Telix agreed. The smallest anomaly can change everything. Outside the viewport, the stars shone on a galaxy in transformation, one where the return of a supposedly extinct species had forced a confrontation, not just with an external enemy, but with the lies that had shaped generations. It wasn't a perfect peace, fraught with tension and distrust on both sides, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in a century, both humans and Vexeri looked to the future with something other than hatred. A cautious, fragile hope that perhaps this time they could build something that would last.